the extent of human consciousness and awareness somehow, based on many sources, seems to be alive and vibrant beyond the body, beyond the brain. We've delved into some of the clinical cases of people who had near-death experiences, and we shared some of those stories. Last week we focused on the idea of heaven and hell from the Jewish perspective, what it is and what it is not. And then we got involved with reincarnation, also trying to see from the Jewish perspective what exactly reincarnation is and how that whole system seems to work. Tonight, we have a very special privilege of having with us Ron Berman, who, besides having a remarkable story, is a remarkable person. And he's been kind enough to come and share his personal story with us this evening. And I think we'll find it extremely entertaining, inspirational, and it could really be a springboard for further pursuing some of these ideas of purpose, meaning, and having perhaps more of a clarity that there's a lot more to life than meets the eye. The structure will be that Ron will address us, and we'll leave about 10 minutes after his discussion for questions. So without further ado, it's my pleasure, Ron Berman.
Thanks. Well, it's probably no surprise I'm here to tell you about my experience, my near-death experiences. But before I do, we have a little bit of time, so we actually watch some time so we don't get too carried away. But to really put you into my perspective so you can understand where I've been, where I was coming from when this happened to me, I'll give you like 15 minutes of a background of where I was before I wore a yarmulke, before I would even consider coming to a class like this, and before I believed any of the things I'm about to tell you actually happened to people. Yes. I was raised Reformed, so at age 13, went to a bar mitzvah, there was a guitar there were lots of gifts, and that was it for me. I never went back into a shul or a synagogue for 23 years and was fine with that. I'm an engineer, a scientist. I feel like I had it in hand. You know, I understood what life was about. I explained it to myself. I could explain it to others. My take on it is when you die, you become dust. Your brain goes away. You're no more. And you want to live life, it's now. You live it up. And I was living it up. I wound up moving to Costa Rica, and I had a bed and breakfast there. Wow. And I was having the time of my life. Partying every day. Really not thinking about others, just thinking about myself. Always keeping in mind, I was not realizing that I was searching for something. You know, that's why I went to Costa Rica, I've been to Fiji, I've been to New Zealand. Always looking for something. And it was just recently I was talking to a college friend of mine. We haven't talked in 20 years. And I told him I became an Orthodox Jew, a religious now. And he said to me, and this just shocked me, he said, I always saw that in you. I never saw it in myself. I said, but Ron, you're always looking for something. You know, you're looking in science, you're looking up in the sky, you're saying, you know, what happens when you reach the end of the universe? Is there a wall there? And I remember you telling this to me, and he's saying this back to me. Is it at that wall? What's on the other side? So, and I was thinking about these things, and he remembers it, and I know. And I can recall it now, but I was always searching. So my search brought me to Costa Rica, and there I had an unfortunate accident. Actually, I fell off my roof. It was kind of a fence by the roof of my house. I was chopping down a branch that was blowing in front of the satellite dish. We're trying to get coverage of 9/11. It was 9/11, 2001. And me and my guests were there in the morning. It was 8 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning, and 9 o'clock. And I'm chopping down the thing, and I slip, and I fall, and I fall 10 feet, and I land flat on my back. And I'm wondering if I can move. And I'm thinking to myself, as I'm moving around, I'm starting to feel my feet and feeling my hands, like I can move again, I get my neck up. I almost said thank God. But I'm like, I don't believe in God. So I'm like, thank goodness. And I was able to get up and walk away, and I brushed it off, went inside the house, had someone else chop down the branch. But we were able to watch 9/11, a terrible, terrible day. But my arm didn't get better so quickly. It blew up like Popeye. You know the cartoon Popeye? Well, some of you are too young to remember, but my arm right here was 3 times its normal size. And after a couple days, my friends, one in particular, would say, "You've got to go to the hospital. I will take you. I'll pay for the cab, whatever it takes. You got to go." And he looked through this guide, said, "You have to go to this hospital." This is not a Jewish guy. He's ex-military. He said, "You go to Hospital SEMA in Santana, and I will put you in a cab or go with you, whatever it takes. If you go to this one hospital." But so important, I'll go to the hospital. And he tells the cab driver that I'm on my way. Cab driver can't find the place. And he's driving all around in circles. I realized later, he didn't want to pay for the toll. I didn't realize this, but he said, "I can't find it, I can't find it. Let me take you to Hospital Biblioteca." It's the old library turned into a hospital. And they care me just the same. What's the big deal? I said, "You know what? This guy made such a big deal. I paid all the money to go all the way over here. Take me to this hospital, see me. I don't care how you do it." And he paid the toll, and he charged me for it. And we got there. It wasn't too long before I realized that there was nobody in the hospital. The hospital was for elective surgery. So there's Americans, American-trained doctors. The doctors are all from Spanish-speaking countries, but they have to go to Baylor University and learn for 2 years. So they speak some English, but they cater to elective surgery, and people want to fly from the U.S. They call it Beverly Hills South. People want to fly down there. They couldn't fly down there. It was 9/11. Flights were canceled for 2 weeks. So I realized that maybe I'm in the wrong hospital. You know, maybe they're closed, but sure enough, someone came to the ER desk eventually, and they took me in, and eventually a doctor saw me. And this doctor, when he came to me, I had 103, 104-degree fever. He looks at my chart, and he looks at me. He looks at my chart. This guy's deal. He looks at me, and he goes, "Berman, you a Jew?" And I'm like, "Wow. Am I a Jew?" I normally say no. I'd say I don't practice religion. And I didn't. I did not believe in God. I did not practice any religion. But this time, I thought, oh, if I say yes, maybe he'll kill me, he'll put me out of my misery, he'll throw my body in the dumpster out back, and my pain will be gone. I won't feel my arm anymore, and my troubles will be over. So I said, "Yeah, I'm a Jew." And he walked away. So I think, okay, they're going to kill me now. He comes back a half hour later. He says, "Look, we can't call the United States. We can't find enough money in your bank accounts here in Costa Rica. We can't get a hold of anybody, any number you gave us, any insurance company, because the phones simply don't work. You have to go to this charity hospital where, unfortunately, they're going to take off your arm." That's the only thing you can do. You have a staph infection in your arm, you have flesh-eating bacteria in your arm, and you have gangrene in your arm, and it has to come off. But it's your left arm. And I'm going to presume you're a right. And a Jewish man needs his left arm for tefillin.
Really?
And I said, what? Tefillah? I didn't know what this tefillin was. They didn't teach me in Reform school, whatever. Where I learned how to be bar mitzvah. There's some sort of Hebrew school they had where I learned how to say the bracha before you get an aliyah. And you know, he said to me, you might want that arm one day for this tefillin. And because of that, I called my shul and I raised the money, if you want to, for you to come into this hospital under my care. I will be your doctor, and we will work as hard as we can to save your arm. But it's a 50-50 chance you'll die. But hey, you're in Costa Rica. There's no liability, there's no malpractice. We can give it a shot. And you know what? We have all the doctors in this hospital are available to work on it. All the nurses, there's nobody else, there's not a single patient in this hospital waiting for surgery. So you know what? We have a chance. The odds are in your favor because of this terrible 9/11 thing that happened. No one else has anything else to do. So I raise the money if you want to come. Otherwise, you have a 90% chance of living if we take the arm off right now. And I'll do that for you too. I'll have some other doctor do it for you. But I feel I should give you that opportunity. I said, sure, let's go for it. Let's try to save my arm. And I went into this thinking, and he said to me, you don't have any obligation to ever wear tefillin for me. You know, there's nothing you need to do. And later I met this guy over and over, and I said, thank you for saving my life. I said, don't thank me. It's all in God's hands. You thank God. And he wanted to have nothing to do with him being in the right place at the right time, because he told me he was not supposed to be there. He was on call because someone else did not show. And it was Saturday that I finally showed up to the hospital when he was finally in there and diagnosed me. And he definitely did not belong there, but he got the call that someone needed to see him. He didn't know I was Jewish then, but because it could have been, he's allowed to work, I guess. And he came, and sure enough, I was Jewish, and he got everybody all fired up over this deal that is a Jew in the hospital, and he needs some people to visit him. And sure enough, I got visitors. I'm getting to the near-death story. Just 5 more minutes, and we'll get there. But the surgeries were really rough. I mean, they had, I'm not going to get into the graphic details, but if you want, I'll tell you off to the side later. But they had to do 8 surgeries, aggressive surgeries with my arm, to cut it open, to save it, to get the flesh-eating bacteria out. You've heard of people who have flesh-eating bacteria.
Yes.
They lose their limbs. They know in the U.S., you cut off the limb to save the body. And here, they were able to aggressively go after this thing that was spreading through my body and get it out. And they tried 10 different antibiotics, and the 10th one worked. But would any other person have the time to go through all the different treatments that these doctors were putting me through? It was so many things that came in my path that were divine, obviously, to save me and my arm, because things did not go well with these surgeries. They were so aggressive, and my infection was so bad, it spread into my lungs. And it shut down my lungs. And they had to put me on a respirator. And the infection spread into my other lung. And my parents had just found the x-rays. It shows one white lung. I don't know if you're a doctor, if anybody here knows what a white lung looks like, but most people would die. That lung is completely infected, it doesn't work, it can't work. This one was most of the way infected. And somehow or another, I came through all this and made a recovery, but during that time when I was on the respirator, things were not looking good. And they called the rabbi in, and they said, look, the last 2 days, you've been going downhill, downhill, downhill. And we have to pull the plug and see what happens. Because I wasn't even responding then. I was almost unconscious most of the time. I did not know what was going on, but I heard them, or I knew that they were pulling the plug, and this rabbi was going to be in the room with me, and they pulled the plug. And I floated away. I'll tell you exactly what happened. I'm going to tell you about the other one experience, because that was my first near-death experience that happened right then. The second one was exactly like the first. The third one is what I'll tell you about now. It wasn't the same as the first two. So let me tell you about it, because it was more of an out-of-body experience. And this happened when it was on the Shabbos between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And the doctors had done surgery that morning. They were not Jewish, the two doctors who were working on the two surgeons. And they went to the beach. It was Saturday. They were going to the beach. It was 3 hours away. And when they called them to say that you have to come back because his vein burst and he's bleeding to death. So we're at the beach. It's 3 hours drive. You got to find another doctor. And my doctor, his name's Max, Dr. Max Gorkin. Max said, yeah, I know a doctor. And he drove to a synagogue not far away, and he found Herman, who wouldn't get in the car to save a Jewish life. He said, I will walk the 45 minutes to the hospital. God will give him that amount of time. So Max is driving along in the car next to him, shouting out my vital signs. As he's walking in his black kapota, because it's Chabad. So he's got the long black coat. He's got his beard that he hasn't shaven. He had a beard longer than mine in the hospital, but kept it clean. You know, he sees patients there, he does surgery from time to time. But now it was the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. He was not cutting it. It was all scraggly. And he's walking, with this black hat and this long black coat. And he wouldn't get in the car until finally, at some point, my vital signs had dropped so low. He got in the car, and he said he never drove on a Shabbos before until I needed him to. And for me, he always let me know this, I drove on Shabbos. And that's why you're here. And I'm glad I got that message from God to do that, because he had no time left. I got in, you had 5 minutes. And he came into the surgery room. He had prepped me and everything. They were all ready to go. He just had to hit the needle into my IV, and I was knocked out. They were just waiting for him. He walks in with his black coat, raises his hands, and I'm looking at the lights. The lights in the surgery room, they're real bright. And he puts on I see his hands, I look at the other people, and I see they're all in gowns and masks and gloves. And this guy with his black coat, his long beard, his black hat, and he starts screaming in Hebrew. And I recognize Baruch, and I'm like, is this God? And I said to him, are you God? He says, no, I'm just making the bracha. I didn't even know what bracha was then. I'm just making the blessing that God should work through my hands. Okay. And I should have recognized him because he introduced himself. He visited me before, but at that stage I wasn't. I had a total of 6 pints of blood put into me. I'd gone into shock. And once they put me under, it is when I had the out-of-body experience. And I didn't realize I had this experience until later on when I was at Herman Shabbos table. I told them about the first 2 times. And he knew exactly when they were. And he said, what about the third time when I operated on you? I said, well, I didn't have the same experience. But he said, but you had no pulse. Your heart was not pumping blood through your body. They considered you dead. They wanted me to get the crash kit and start your heart back again. But somehow you came back before they could do that. And I'm like, well, here's what happened. So, I'll give you 15 minutes to think of what happened. So, when I was recovering a couple of days later, this nurse came into my room and she says, hi, I'm Mariana Ellis. I looked at her and I said, I know. We met at the party. And she looks at me, she goes over to my chart, she pulls out my chart, she says, no, you were in surgery during the party. Like, no, I met you in a party, you came in a white limousine, you had two friends with you, they were wearing a blue dress, you were wearing a white dress and it was blown up at the bottom. It was a big costume. It was a big costume party. Behind you was a blue Lincoln, and behind that was a white Lincoln. And in the white Lincoln was your boyfriend. And he was wearing a pirate's outfit. And he had this big hat, like a sailor or like a pirate. And the other guy who was with him, he was in the second car. He had the things like a captain would wear on a staple. Epaulets? Epaulets. And he looked like a Navy officer. And this was all part of like some costume party from, I don't know, pirate days, 1700s, 1800s. And she was just, couldn't believe it. And she's thinking, there's something going on with the communication here, because she speaks Spanish, I speak English, we're not communicating. She walks out. I'm not making a big deal about it now. She comes back with the guy dressed in the military outfit. He said, okay, is this my boyfriend? I go, no, that's the guy who came in the second car with the pirate's outfit. He looks at me in shock. As he did also, now he speaks good English. So he was able to communicate and realize that I could explain every detail of those three cars pulling up to this party, who was in the car, what they were saying, what her name was, and what her boyfriend's name was, who he was, and on, just during that time when those people were there. And she looked and she realized that that's when the party started, when I arrived, that's about the time you were in the middle of your surgery. So she couldn't figure it out, she left, we became friendly afterwards, but that was an out-of-body experience that seemed pretty verifiable, and I learned later, didn't you know, they had a big costume party on the other side of the hospital because they had nothing to do. They still had no patients. So they're looking to fill time. And, these are people that are pretty well off in Costa Rica. They're doctors and nurses. And they're going to have a royal party, and they did. All right, so get into what happened when the real experience happened. Because that to me, I drifted out of my body somewhat. I was definitely remembering that. And we have dreams. And I certainly thought before, when someone dies and their brain shuts off, you go through a tunnel, you get to the end of the tunnel and your brain's shutting off, and you know all these things. And I try to always envision what it would be like to die. But I didn't experience any of this tunnel. But ironically, I experienced a lot of things you read in these books. Life After Life, Proof of Heaven that I just read. I mean, that wasn't so great what went through, but there were a couple of things that just shocked me. Were how I describe how things work in this place. So where I was, I didn't go through a tunnel, but I found myself, I don't know if you set up the tables like this on purpose, but I found myself at the end of a table. You've heard this, a number of you have heard the story already. So I was at the end of a table, I just was there, and my deceased relatives were all on my right. In a specific order. My father's mother was there, my father's father was there. That seat was empty, the third seat. But it was a beautiful wooden seat. It's decorated in gemstones. I could see there's a wooden mantle on the back, and there's a big one in the middle. And someone had worked hard on that, decorating that chair. I know it was the man sitting in that chair, the fourth chair. That was my grandfather, my mother's father, who passed away when I was just a couple of years old. So I hardly knew him, but he seemed to have the most ability to communicate with me. But I'm in a place where my grandmother, grandfather, and rest in peace, they're sitting there next to me, and I'm here. I must be dead, is the only thing I can think is, I must not be breathing, and I must really be freaking out now. Why am I not? Say, I should be nervous as can be to be dead, to realize I'm with my grandparents. About that, I was more nervous coming here to speak to you than I was at this place. I mean, I felt that I wasn't afraid of anything, and my grandfather is like hovering over his seat. Just, everything's going to be okay. It's all going to be all right. And don't worry. We're all working for you. But his lips aren't moving. He's able to communicate to me telepathically. And you know what? We're in a place where we're not breathing because my parents and my grandparents are in the ground. So how can they be breathing? So how do you talk? So telepathically, I was able to understand him clearly, clear as day. He's telling me all these people are working for you. You have nothing to worry about. Stay calm. And I was perfectly calm. I felt perfectly at peace. Everybody here, I can keep on going on. My other relatives, they all were in specific seats, going on seemingly forever. Tables seemed to go on forever. And all on my right side were my relatives, all in black and white. And behind them, even though the table seemed to go on forever, it ended somewhere, it was kind of foggy. But behind them, there's all these people floating around. Not floating, but like walking, but there's like a cloudy, murky area. But even behind that, there's these doors. 2 doors going up seemingly, as far as I could see, cracked ever so slightly, one of them. And the light coming in from those doors was lighting up the whole hallway, a banquet hall I would call it, that I was in, where all these people are there working for me, doing, I don't know what. I guess maybe it was a trial of some sort, but I know all my relatives are there rooting for me, and they're all there on my behalf to make me feel calm. I mean, my grandparents, it seemed like they had better things to do, but they were there for me. I knew they were there because I was there, and they were going to help me in any way they could. But my grandfather, it was just amazing how much we connected, him and I, in that place. And later on, when I told my parents and my grandmother how much I knew about him and how much he connected with me, he said, that's your grandfather. It's exactly how he was. How did you know that? I said, well, I had this experience. I saw him, he communicated with me. And so when he was in a party, he had to go say hello to somebody if he was in the room. He would not leave the party. He could not stand to have somebody know that he was at the same place and did not say hello to him. He would not offend anybody like that. And he was going out of his way to make sure that I recognized him and I knew that he was doing everything he could for me over and beyond what anybody else would. Not to compete, but just because that's the type of person he was. And then after that was my great-grandfather, Joe. And I told my parents that too. And they said I could not have known him because he died before he was born. And I described him. He wasn't acting in any specific way, but he was there and I described what he looked like. And then I knew his name, and no one really talked about him. It was just something in and of itself. But I haven't told you it was on the left side yet. So that's what really changed my life. Because the left was all in color. And the colors were, it was blue at first, like a sky blue, and towards the end was an orange. And people into Kabbalah are really interested in this stuff. I can't make heads or tails of it. But they'll tell me, you were in this Sephirah and that, in between this world and okay, I don't know what you're talking about, but it sounds good. But I told them the orange light color came closer to me, and I heard or saw God. And people asked me to describe, what does God look like? I said, well, he spoke to me. And I said, well, okay, he spoke to you. What did he look like? I said, well, I saw the speaking. I don't know how to describe it. I really did not know how to describe it other than I saw the words. I saw what he was communicating to me differently from how my grandparents were communicating to me. They communicated without words, telepathically. I heard a voice, clear as day, coming from me with the love that only I could tell you I give to my children. My two little children, my little girls were crying today. They came home. They didn't have a nap today at school. They're 3 and 4. So they were all wound up. And I just pour it on with them, when I see them crying. It just breaks my heart. So, that's the type of love I was feeling. I was in pain, and here's my Father, even beyond my Father, undevoted love. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't deserve love. Here's God, who I said did not exist. Now I know he's here. And he still loves me and cares about me and is wishing me the very best and giving me guidance on what to do with my life. And as much as I was feeling that, as powerful as it was, and I was loving it, boom, it went away. And I wake up, there's a rabbi at the edge of my bed, squeaking my bed, rocking back and forth. Saying the prayers that one says when one's dying. I learned this later because he taught me Aleph Beis, he taught me how to read Hebrew, he taught me how to learn to fill in. But he squeaked on my bed. So I wake up to the squeaking. And I say, hey buddy, can you keep it down? Just like that. And he turns around, he looks, thought he heard someone talking, but they told him that I was going to die. They're pulling the plug on the respirator, and we're pronouncing him dead. We'll walk back in to get the body when we walk out. And he starts going back to this. He's squeaking in the bed. I say, excuse me? And he turns around and he sees that I'm now awake and talking to him. And I start having a conversation with him. I said, who are you? And he Rabbi Wilhelm, I came here, I heard you were in serious trouble, and didn't go into great details, but I see him going like this. And I've been in an isolation ward, and there's nurses outside, and he's going like this, and then more animated. And I was like, what's wrong? He was really getting spooked because he thought I should be dead, and he thought they should run in. And I remember they all came up, and they started looking in. They're like, we've been working on this guy nonstop for 2 days, and look what this rabbi does. He brings him back to life. And he didn't take credit for it either. But, it was just, they say it was just an amazing miracle that I gone from dying, from real death, to, from then on, I was starting to recover a little bit. The next surgery, I had another experience. I found myself in the same place, and I was able to feel the warmth and had the whole experience over again. But I came back, and then I had that third experience I was telling you about. To wrap things up, I'll just tell you, couldn't run to bed or breakfast anymore. And my arm was in a sling like this for 6 months. And then I went through 2 years of rehabilitation to get my arm back to work. They said I would never make a fist. Best I could do when I left Costa Rica was go like that. So the only thing you could do to maybe get a little bit better, we worked on you 3 days a week for a year. The only thing maybe we could do is if you got in the water every day. So I did. I became a dive master, one-arm dive master for a while. And I rehabilitated my arm every day. And I started learning. I took the olive base that I learned. I took my tefillin to where I was becoming a dive master. And slowly, I became a little bit more observant. And as I connected, I realized that the thing I had been searching for all my life was right there in front of me. It was just the Judaism that I was running from. You know, a rabbi came my way, I turned around and ran. But now I feel happiness, you know, contentment. You know, I struggle at times with my marriage, with my kids, but you know what? I have kids, and I'm going to die having kids. And if I died before, left this world without having that, that would certainly be incomplete. So I really feel now everything's connected for me. We all go through trials. I've certainly been through mine. Everyone's going through theirs. And I realize God gave me my trials, and He continues to give me my trials, and He continues to give you your trials, but some of ours are easier than others. Mine are probably real easy compared to some of yours and some other people I know. But there are times when how am I going to get through this? But to get through the pain from this arm thing is just unbelievable. I don't wish it on anybody. But nothing really scares me now. I quit carrying a gun. I used to own a gun before all this. And I put on tzitzit. I feel that's my bulletproof vest. I don't go running out and trying to stop a robber. But I used to carry a gun thinking that I could, you know. But now I feel that same protection that I was looking for in a gun, I have in my faith. And if God wants me to be killed, He can take me out anytime. You know, this wall could fall down, that could be gone. That's it. So I have faith that when my time comes, it's going to come. And God has a plan for me. And this is part of the plan. You know, if you asked me 15 years ago, 13 years ago, if I'd never be speaking to a crowd of Jewish people about near death, I'd say, no way. That's the last thing I'll be doing. Because number one, I'm not religious. I don't believe in God. Number two, this near-death thing is all made up. And now I got to tell you, it's the most real thing I've ever experienced. So with that, does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
I've been thinking about this the whole time you were speaking. I asked you this. But during the time you were feeling at peace and really peaceful and you saw your grandpa, did you ever have a feeling that you didn't want to go back? That you just wanted to say, this is kind of cool, I feel great here. Like, I don't want to go back to Earth.
Yeah, when, not so much with my grandpa, because he was a little nervous. He was trying to make sure that I was calm. But when I felt the warmth from Hashem, when I felt that, I did not want that to leave. That felt so much like, oh, the most amazing amount of love just pouring inside through my heart. You know, the warmth going through my body, like shivers. And you think how cold I am without that. That I did not want to go back. But the place I was in, I don't know what I was doing at that table, but that warmth. It was only for a brief time. You know, once he said what he said, the light, the orange turned back to blue and he pulled away. So I wasn't feeling it towards the end there, but it was something I yearned for. And God willing, I'll be there again.
Thanks, it was an interesting presentation, but I did find something very interesting. I've always wondered that when you die, how will I recognize those souls if they're existing? You're describing your grandfather. Did he look like your grandfather? Or did he look like a 10-year-old kid? I mean, you've described what you, probably you saw a vision of the last time you, in that time warp, you saw that person the way he existed the last time you saw him.
Exactly. So I recognize my grandfather from the time that I was growing up with him, my great-grandfather from, I don't know, it must have been a picture of him early on. I mean, everybody seemed to be under 50. So my grandparents, who were very old when they passed away, they were much younger and in a much happier state of mind, you know, where their bodies didn't ache and they were happy. You know, they weren't in pain like they were when they passed away. Now, I don't know if everybody was in their 30s, like some people say, 40s or 50, but they were younger. And then I recognized my great-grandfather, which I never met, and knew his name. I'm not sure how that happened. I'm not sure about a lot of these things. I was at this place that I was sure did not exist, and it changed my life. Yes, I'm here now. I wear yarmulke, I do all these things to connect with God. And by the way, it wasn't a denominational experience. The God I experienced was a God that was for everybody, whether I was Jewish or whatever. Judaism came so easy for me, coming back, I should say, because all these people came to the hospital visiting me day in and day out. I didn't know what they were doing there. I mean, these people come from the local synagogue and they visit me, and now I know it. Big cholim, visiting the sick, but I didn't know. I thought they wanted money from me, and I told them, I don't have any money, go away. And he said, well, I brought you a cake. I'm like, well, that's nice, but I still can't pay you for it. He said, it's okay, that's okay. We just want you to have it. We want you to be happy. We're here visiting you. We know you don't have family in Costa Rica. And we want you to have you over our house when you get out. And they did. They all went out for Shabbos to the community there. And I started keeping Shabbos. And when I was a dive master, I even kept Shabbos. And something I hold to now, and very much in kosher too. For all intents and purposes, I'm an Orthodox Jew. I do everything I learned to do. And I think it's important for me to connect back with God.
You know, you described your mom as being dead, so to speak, at some point in what you described. How medically did they account for the fact that it recovered to the point where it was working the way it was before?
They can't. They just said it was a miracle. I have the x-ray. I've showed it to doctors here. Well, one doctor. They've seen it in Costa Rica. They all gawk at it. And the ones who see it cold, they don't know what's wrong. They say, oh, it's sad. That guy died a terrible death. Because there's no way to recover from such a thing. But they had me on a heart lung machine when my lungs were like that, so my lungs were not working. But after that second trip, I started to come back. I made a full recovery. Everything came back. The infection left my body, left my lungs, left my arm, and they were able to patch my arm back together, and I could make a fist. And they said, I've never played golf. I'm tempted to try it now. I used to have a handicap.
How long a stay were you in the hospital, and at what period did these experiences, three similar experiences, happen in what period of time?
So I was in a hospital a total of 17 days. And it was over the first 8 days that I had those three experiences.
So after the third experience, obviously the 10th antibiotic started to work.
Yeah.
And was each experience the same length or same configuration, or was it slightly varied?
Well, the first one I was at the table,
Right.
and it was much longer than the second one. I was there for just a short time, and I wanted to ask questions, but I was just in and out.
Right.
And the third one, I wasn't at this table, I was at the party.
Oh, the party.
You know,
So, do you recall what Hashem said to you? Okay, is that something to share? Or?
yeah, 5 words. He said, you were going to be a diplomat.
Wow.
You were going to be.
Yeah, the rabbis tell me I need to get up and speak, that's my diplomacy.
So, but how do you interpret that? Like, are you supposed to like do kiruv and stuff? Like, have new people at your table, perhaps?
I actually got the sense that it was more around politics, to be honest with you. I mean, when I got back the second time, I asked how, and I wanted to ask when, where.
Yeah.
But I don't think I was the how, and he did tell me you learn 5 languages, and when you do, you'll be ready.
5 languages?
That's all. So I finished learning Spanish while I was in rehabilitation. I'm working on my Hebrew now.
So only 2 more to go.
I don't know if it's programming languages or computer languages. I know computer languages too. So,
Did your family visit you from the United States while you were there?
towards the end, they were able to come down. Yeah, they were one of the first flights that were
Oh,
allowed
of
to
course,
leave
it
the
was
country.
in 9/11.
Yeah, so
They
eventually,
couldn't even call and
No.
find out how you were.
for the first week, they couldn't call. It wasn't until the second week they were able to come down.
So of the 17 days, at what, would you recall which day it was when you had your first experience?
No. I could probably figure it out,
Yeah.
but, I mean, I know the third day was that Shabbos between, the third time was the Shabbos
Right.
between them. So I could probably go back and figure out, because it was only about 8 days, that I was there till that third experience happened, so.
So after the third experience, then obviously your condition improved radically,
Yeah.
which then must have knocked the socks off.
Yeah, well, I was already on recovery, it was just a fluke. They
Yes.
didn't catch up, they were in a rush to get to the beach.
Yeah.
And they didn't fix up my arm, right?
Right.
And they left the vein, 1 stitch, minus 1 stitch, and it blew open.
I've got one last question from Jeff, and then we'll.
So when you've shared this experience with, I think you mentioned,
Kabbalists.
Kabbalists, what kind of insight did they give you to the actual details and description of your experience communicating silently? I think you said talk to text, colors. I mean, what insight?
When I spoke at a yeshiva in Morristown, they were just enthralled with what I was telling them. Just on this left side, they wanted to know all the details of the colors. And I can't remember what they were telling me, but they had these books that they would describe. They were reading, and they could refer to them and say, oh, in this book, this says this and that, and this is what you were going through at this stage and that stage, and when you were talking to your grandfather, you were in that.
So they analyzed it.
They could go by what they learned, and there's like Tanya, I think they learned that the Babich that goes through the different aspects of the worlds.
And when you were having this experience, while you were experiencing it, did you know that you were going back, that it wasn't a forever stay?
Yeah, I knew, especially the second time. See, after the first time, I was freaked out when I came back. When I was there, I was at peace. When I came back, I was freaked out because I'm going to be a diplomat. I'm an introvert, I'm an engineer, I don't want to do that. So that's how I got to ask how. And it put my mind a little at ease. It's still a little unnerving. Did that answer your question?
Thank you so much, Ron. It's a good thing this is the last of the 3-part series, because the jokes on afterlife are running very slim, and I don't have many left. But I will tell you one interesting story. A man dies and is given a choice. You have 3 rooms of hell you could choose. Heaven is not an option. Let me see the options. Door number 1, he peeks inside, and he sees people are burning and yelling in agony and pain and screaming. No thank you. Door number 2, he peeks inside. Again, people are being beaten and whipped and devoured by wild beasts. No. Door number 3, he looks inside. There's a big pile of manure. But people are sitting there, serene, drinking coffee, eating donuts. He figures, at the best atmosphere, not the nicest ambiance, but I'll choose door number 3. Okay? He goes in, he gets a cup of coffee, a donut, and then he hears over the loudspeaker, "Okay, boys, break's over, back on your heads."
Back on the head.
I want to take a look at the booklet here as we conclude on page 10. This is an excerpt from a book written by Rabbi Meir. He's a very special person. He was a chaplain of Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles. And he has a book where he really speaks a lot about his personal stories, a lot of the experiences that he went through dealing with people who were dying. And on page 10, the left column, the 3rd paragraph, I like to quote you what he writes. "Naturally, there's a delicate balance between being aware of our mortality, which is healthy, and being preoccupied with mortality, which can be immobilizing. If we can accept death as our natural companion, then when it appears, its presence will seem natural, just one more stage of a meaningful life. Each of us experiences many types of birth and death throughout our lives. In addition to our physical birth, we participate in the birth of relationships, including marriage. We give birth to dreams as well as to children. We give birth to ideas, some of which we act on, and some of which just fade away. And finally, in the course of our physical death, we give birth to ourselves anew, to a spiritual, non-physical entity that is impossible to describe or comprehend." It's interesting when Ron was relating his experience, that idea of being able to communicate with deceased relatives, but not through the method of speech, rather some kind of telepathic communication, that is shared by thousands of people. When they tell about their also near-death experiences, all communication, for some reason, is not through what we view as speech. It's in a whole different realm, a whole different plane of that relationship. I do want to just add one thing parenthetically with the story of the rabbi who began to walk to the hospital on Shabbos. That is not the appropriate Jewish response. Jewish law mandates that if there's ever a question of life and death, you don't start walking, you get in the car and drive to the hospital. Just to make that clear. Western civilization has taught us to be afraid of death because we view death in secular culture as eternal silence, darkness, the loss of identity, the loss of consciousness. I no longer exist. And because of that fear, the way most of us react or respond to the awareness of death is denial. It's something I don't want to face, and therefore the response is, it doesn't exist. That's a normal human reaction. As Rabbi Meir is telling us, which is the authentic Torah perspective, death is not something we're afraid of. Death is something that's a natural process of living. We have different births throughout our lives, as he mentioned, and the analogy we gave of leaving the womb. You're leaving your comfortable, familiar surroundings, dark and cozy inside here, and you're going to a whole new world. What's going to be on the other side? But the answer is, once you get there, it's a world of love, of light, of warmth, of potential you didn't have when you were in the womb. The Torah perspective has always been, that's how we view leaving this world. We're leaving the confines of this reality, what we view to be normal and familiar, but we're entering into a new reality, a new stage of existence where there's more potential. The limitations and the restrictions we have here in the physical world are no longer present. And it's based on that perspective, based on the understanding of what it means to be immortal, that we as human beings don't die with the bodies, the fear of death fades away. There's one of two ways to respond to dying. Number one is, eat, drink, and be merry. I know I'm not going to be here too long. Let me grab as many things as I can. The example I like to give is when you go to the wedding and you're late for the cocktail hour and they're about to start the chuppah. What do? You start scurrying as much as possible. Let me grab the Chinese food, the ginger ale, and just gotta get it together. That's how some people respond to becoming cognizant of death, which is, let me grab as many things as possible. Oy vey, we haven't been to South Africa yet. I gotta get there before I go. The other response is, I know I have limited time here. I'm not going to be here forever. Let me do the most to make it a meaningful, purposeful time here on earth. Let me change people's lives. Let me elevate myself and others. Let me give. Two different ways of responding to mortality. Clearly the Jewish way is the latter. But what this means is not only do we live forever, but the relationships that we create here on earth live forever as well. When a person that we know or love passes away, they're not gone. They're now out of the womb. We'll be out of the womb also one day. And we reunite and connect with those people. The saying that's commonly said at a secular wedding is what? Till death do we part. That doesn't exist under the chuppah. You know why? Because it's not true. Death is not a parting of any relationship. It's a leaving of this realm into another, more real, more unlimited realm. But relationships that we have here on earth last forever, to feel the comfort, to feel the warmth. And as the skeptics say, you want to believe it because it feels good. And the answer is, it does feel good. But just because it feels good, it doesn't mean it's not true. To the contrary, I think in our time together we've seen very clear evidence pointing to the fact that we do survive the body. The definition of human consciousness is not limited to the brain. These are beautiful ideas. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to continuing more classes together.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful evening.